Go! Full take. Jerkbait. Morning guys, it is super chilly and cold in Sweden. We decided to go earlier than we normally do. It's March. Yeah, normally we would fish in the Netherlands, but we thought, why won't we go to Sweden early March? Because usually it's kind of good. And the fishing has been good the week prior before we arrived. And now the temperature drop has came, and as you can see, everything is covered in ice. It is cold, but today we are gonna do some bay fishing, some proper bay fishing with some jerkbaits, some soft baits. We will mainly focus on how we can fish in cold water bays, in cold but kind of good conditions like these. Not much wind, sun is out. The fish should be moving in the shallows and moving in towards the spawning areas. But that being said, today I'm out with Jesper. He joined me from the Netherlands, and we're gonna go into the bays and fish those shallow areas with all kinds of jerkbaits and soft baits and see if we can find the pike on the shallow in really cold conditions. So let's go. So we arrived at the first spot. It is still super cold. We had to get out the jet boil some water to unfreeze our reels because we left the reels in the boat at night. And the result was that our reels were completely stuck and frozen, but some boiling water does the job. Today we are out on a big lake and we're gonna target fish in the bays. And it is still pretty cold. It's like 2.5 degrees on the open water. 4 degrees if you're lucky in some bays, usually around 3.5. But that is the trick for today. We're gonna try and find the warmer water inside the bays. It's close to spawning, at least when the temperature goes up and the conditions are right, the pike will start moving in these bays. That's what we're gonna try and do today. We're gonna try and find, in these cold conditions, pike that are on the shallows or close to the shallows, using a variety of different jerkbaits. Let's head out first and try to catch a couple of fish, and we'll dive into the techniques later on in this video. Go! Oh, die ging er hard op, zeg. Little rascal. Not the monsters we're after. Needed to cut the treble completely and held the jerkbait. Good cutters, good pliers, super important.
Ooit gewoon een paar plekken.
What a nice bait on the jerkbait. Probably hit like 90 centimeters, but I don't think this fish will push 10 kilos. What do you think? Well, let's get her back so you can feed and regain some strength, but cool take. Fish number 3. We are intentionally fishing the edge where the water is. The wind is pushing against the reeds. You can see that the water is pushing in, and we already saw that the temperature in the beginning of the bay was roughly like 3.5, 4 degrees, and against the reeds it's 4.5. And to us that might not be a big difference, but for these pike, that slight increase in water temperature means the world for them. So, and this fish, like we have 4.5 degrees at the moment. This fish has spawned already. Well, for us, like I come from the Netherlands, and it's highly unusual for us in the Netherlands for fish to have spawned with such low temperatures. But in Sweden, it's quite common actually that at low temperatures, even far up north, they spawn underneath the ice. So it's cool. Free fish. Pretty happy with it. On jerk baits, visual takes. Nice. Cold water doesn't seem to matter at all. We had a couple contacts, missed a couple fish, but most of the fish we spotted, we caught them, but not that many at the moment. But that's the way it is with cold water. You're not gonna catch 20, 25 fish during the day. It is possible, but I think you need to go to the archipelago then. But for the inner lakes in Sweden, yeah, we got 6 fish now, and we are heading towards the next part of a bay system. It's a really shallow channel going out here. And finally the snow has greeted us as well. It's pretty cold outside still. It's roughly 4 degrees, 4.5 outside. And the water temperature is quite similar, 4.4. We spotted some spots where it was above 5 degrees, 5.1, 5.2. And important also is to dress warmly. I got, I think, a t-shirt, a long sleeve sweater, a hoodie, a puffer jacket, and then my Grenad's jackets on top of that. You could layer up a bit more. I got double pants underneath it as well, sweatpants, some jeans underneath it, and then my bib. It is cold, and especially when the wind starts to catch up, it's gonna be really chilly. So make sure you put on multiple layers, because that will protect you from the elements, and that is really important during a long and cold spring day like this, because it's not comfortable at all. But the good thing, when you're casting, you stay warm. And also, one tip for the guys that have really cold hands. Most of you guys are holding your reel like this, and this will cause your hand to start to get really cold, especially when the water starts spraying up from the spool of your reel. Try to learn yourself to cast like this. So hold the rod with your hand, not the reel itself. If you put your fingers behind the trigger, you still got enough grip to set the hook properly when you get a strike. But if you start holding it like this, especially in the morning when it's sub-zero, it's gonna be brutal on your hands. Try pointing it downwards as well, if you can. So the water sprays down like this. If you fish it like this, the water will come up. And then your gloves will start to get wet and frozen in the end if it's cold enough. So that's one way to stay warm. And another tip is to use these little hand warmers. You can put them in the palm of your hand like this. And keep you warm for like roughly 6 hours. They're quite warm. They advise you not to put it on your skin, but we do it. It makes your life a bit more bearable when you start casting out in these, I wouldn't say Siberian conditions, but it is pretty damn cold. So we are gonna head out towards the next bay system. It's roughly 2 meters deep. The cool thing about this bay is that it's like 2.5 meters in the middle. Got some grass coming up, and then when you work towards the shallows, you got like reeds that are separate from the shoreline where the reeds are really thick. We're gonna fish between the grass, see if we can find the pike in the deeper pockets. If we can't find them over there, we're gonna move towards the shallow area. The thing that we both noticed today is that most of the fish we spotted were on the sunny side of the bay. So sunlight, really important. Shadows can be really good during summertime, especially when it's gonna get really hot. But for these kind of conditions, sunshine is everything. Sunshine and wind direction as well. But we're gonna pack up, as in dress up properly, put our hoodies on, our buffs on, and fish the next spot. So let me walk you through the lure selection of the stuff that we're using today. Keep in mind we're fishing fairly shallow, between 2–2.5 meters and sometimes even 50–60 centimeters. And you have vegetation, grass that you need to steer over. So you want to use a mix of baits. Some baits you want to run really close underneath the surface, but other ones you want to be able to run a bit deeper when you want to. Let me start out with the hard baits. And that is mainly Scout jerkbait, small Scout swimmer. This is a 12.5 centimeter. And then the 14 centimeter Scout swimmer. Even though the Scout swimmers and the Scout jerkbaits, they come equipped with BKK trebles underneath it, we pimped this one because it's already such a bright color. Thought it would be a good idea to put the UV BKKs underneath it. This one has a short radius, but it's fairly slow to fish because you can let it spin around its axis like this. The jerkbait, however, goes a bit wider and has longer pulses, and also when you slow it down it has a slow wobble like this, but you need to wait for like a second and a half, then it starts to descend and then you see the wobble like this. And if you can time that perfectly, glide it out. Usually what I do is just 2 taps, glide it out, wait for 1–1.5 seconds, then you see that slow wobble dog going down. And if the situation allows you, if the situation allows you to do so, you can wait for like 1 or 2 seconds extra, and 1, 2, and then continue your retrieve. This one runs really shallow unless you let it sink down with long pauses, or you can put a clip-on weight in front of the Scout jerkbait, but you can also do that in front of the Scout swimmer, which has been fairly good for us if you want to fish a bit deeper at like 1.5 or 2 meters of water. Just put a 15-gram clip-on in front of it. It will still move like this, but it will obviously sink down much faster. So you will need to fish it in a bit of a more steady retrieve, because with a 15-gram clip-on in front of it, it will sink down like this, and that's not really an ideal presentation. One other cool thing with Söder is you can get these custom colors. This is a Eastfield custom color with a black belly, silverback, all kinds of orange and magenta spots on it. Let's cover the Scout swimmer a bit more. This is the Pike one. We've caught really well on this one in the Netherlands. Fire Tiger one, quite different in size, but both are fairly easy to fish. Just a steady retrieve works well. You can play with the rocker or the slinger from your reel and have it swim like this. What I find is the more I try to tap it, the less the movement is. So I like to use it like that. This is what some people also call a search bait. You can fish it fairly fast, catches a ton of fish, super easy to fish. And once you notice that fish are on the spot, you can move to something that's a bit slower, like a jerkbait. Then move towards the soft baits. There are 2 baits that I would pick in a bait situation like this from Söder. One is the 20 centimeter Scout Shad. The other one is the 18 centimeter Scout Kicker. We have been very successful using the Scout Kicker fishing pelagic, because the tail has a really subtle movement, doesn't do much at all. And for winter fishing during nighttime, that subtle movement is more than enough. And it's different than the traditional V-tails or the paddle tails that are out there on the market. These you can fish with a shallow rig. Söder supplies these as well. You can also put a clip on in front of it. In bait situations like we are fishing today, you don't need any weight in front of it. And I like to fish it with a pulsating movement. So I just fish it in a steady retrieve, speed it up a little, and then slow it down a bit. Steady retrieve, speed it up a little, slow it down a bit. And then you will see the tail move like this. As always with pulse tails, when people start using it, they don't really like the movement of the bait because it doesn't move much like a swim bait or like a jerk bait. It has more of a steady movement, which for some people is unappealing. But if you move it really slow underneath the surface, you can see the wake that this pulse tail generates. Moves a ton of water, and the vibration is something that the pike will pick up. These are perfect sizes to fish in the shallows, and all kinds of fish will take it. Smaller ones, but also the big ones. Ooh, yo, the Scout Kicker. Nice. Healthy fish. This one is the first we caught today. that hasn't spawned yet. Prime condition, no markings, anything. On the 18 centimeter kicker, like a really slow presentation. Nice. Now there is a big misconception about jerkbait fishing, and that you need to use short rods. It came from the idea that the technique needed to be striking downwards to get motion into the bait. Now, a lot of modern jerkbaits don't need that tapping motion anyway. I'm using the Scout jerkbait at the moment. If you use the Scout swimmer as well, you can do it using the rocker or the slinger of your reel. As you can see, we're in quite a grassy area at the moment. And in those grassy areas, a long rod has actually a couple of benefits. One, the obvious thing is that a longer rod makes longer casts, but also I can fish it up higher than I can do it with a shorter rod. So you don't need a rod that is 1.80 meters or 1.90 meters like we did use back in the days. This is a rod that's actually 2.70 meters. It's the Söder Pike fight rod. I often use the Scout swim bait rod. It's one of my favorites. But now I'm using this long rod because it gives me the ability to steer over the vegetation, over the grass, and make my bait, especially in the beginning of my longer casts, run much more shallow, and it gives me more control. Also, but that's a personal preference, fighting a fish on a longer rod, I find it more enjoyable, especially when you go really short, like 1.80 meters or 1.90 meters. You lose a bit of feeling in a rod. That is definitely not the case with a longer rod like this. The fight is just much more interesting when you use a longer rod.
Shallow water fishing in cold conditions can be effective with the right slow presentation and also paying attention to details like water temperature and wind direction. It is a good alternative to deep water fishing, which requires a completely different approach. We recently did a video on softbait fishing in these cold conditions, where Eastville pro staff Jacob Ruktvís and I got caught up in a blizzard and had to move a literal mountain of snow to be able to fish. Make sure to check out that video too, subscribe to the Söder YouTube channel, and we'll catch you guys in the next video, which will probably take place in much warmer conditions. Thanks for watching, see ya.